Let's start here, shall we? College kids now are learning to snitch on each other through secret tip lines. This is Germany, East Germany under the Soviets. They had the Stasi, and they got people to snitch on each other. That is the one thing that people always have said about America. They'll come over and they'll say, Americans are so nice and they're so trusting. Well, it's not that we were that trusting. It's that Europe wasn't trusting. Nobody trusted each other because for centuries they've turned each other in for one reason or another. So keep it to yourself. Keep it in the family. What are you saying? Don't say. We're open because we've never had that kind of thing. So when George Bush first promoted, hey, you see something, say something, call the White House snitch line if you see something that your neighbor is doing. No, I mean, if I see my neighbor and he's, obviously something is wrong, I'll call the local police. Hey, can you just check this out? But I'm not watching my neighbor and snitching on my neighbor. And that's what's happening right now. People are being in college. This dorm room number in this dorm room had a sign that said all solicitors must be able to define the word woman. And then the campus, PC police come. 79 complaints at the University of Connecticut. There's a bathroom that is being identified based on gender. Oh, my gosh, no. There was some verbal remarks directed at certain race and gender identity at this comedian that was on campus. Really? In Illinois, a student was reported for saying that there were only two genders and reportedly not wanting to live with a roommate who just makes stuff up in his head. That's no longer acceptable. Meanwhile, to further curb speech, Sheila Jackson Lee has introduced the Leading Against White Supremacy Act of 2023. It is one of the most unconstitutional and radical pieces of legislation proposed in I don't know how many years. The Leading Against White Supremacy Act. It aims to prevent and prosecute white supremacy-inspired hate crime and conspiracy to commit white supremacy-inspired hate crime, blah, 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 blah. So if you engage in what is defined as white supremacy hate and you inspire a hate crime, well, if it was used in the planning, development, preparation, or perpetration of any of the crime, you're responsible and you go to prison. But they don't define exactly what white supremacy is and white supremacy crimes are. Okay? Now, seems like a problem, maybe. Especially when you say there is no definition in the law of white supremacy ideology. And then, the conspiracy provision. It makes it illegal to publish material that inspires a crime. So if I publish something and somebody read it, some lunatic, and they were like, oh my gosh, I got to take this into my own hands. I'm going to go shoot down that Chinese weather balloon myself. This government would probably say that was a crime. And if they were white, and they're like, yeah, and white power, I could be prosecuted. You could be prosecuted. It doesn't matter if they're mentally ill or not. This is kind of a problem. Kind of a problem for millions of Americans. Now, this has all happened before. All of this has happened before. There is nothing new under the sun. The question is, are we going to learn from history and recognize the problems and recognize what did people do? Did it work or did it not work? Did they do something or not do something? You can't just expect utopia to happen, because utopia is, in a better world, it'd be a coloring book, and it would be, at best, fiction. The word utopia actually comes from the 16th century, and it was kind of a joke. Utopia, it was written by Thomas More, and he took the Greek prefix for not or no, and the suffix for place. No place. That's what utopia means. No place or nowhere. Get it? So I think the book by Thomas More is a prediction of communism. It takes place on a fictional island called Utopia. It's an island of slavery where poverty is cured by harmony, crime is solved by equity, private property, money, been abolished. Social classes have been unmasked for what they really are, a conspiracy of the rich. And Utopia, the island nowhere, achieved a complete equality of goods. Now, equality of goods, what they did was they just destroyed the meaning of all goods, because everybody shares in Utopia. And to devalue currency, precious objects are treated like trash. People give diamonds to children instead of marbles. They have chamber pots or toilets made of gold. And even the chains on the slaves are made of gold. And traditional institutions mean nothing. Euthanasia is common on the island of Utopia because nobody really cares about the value of anything, including human life. Utopians always claim to be humanist. I just want to do what's best for all humans. And they offer that utopian view. And again, it is the basis of Marxism and communism. And really, it's just all a lie, but it's a diversion. It's a delay tactic. Because people don't realize this is a lie until usually it's too late, because it's a slow boil. Think of how you are accepting things now that you wouldn't have accepted 15 years ago, 10 years ago. 10 years ago, if I said men could have babies too, every liberal would have said, not possible. What are you talking about? Well, that's what you're going to tell me in about 10 years. No, I'm not. That's ridiculous. That's not. You are now parroting and saying things that you know are nonsense. And I'm speaking to America in general. And people are saying right now, give me the power so I can make you powerful. Yeah. And the choice is always, it's going to be Armageddon. It's going to be, he's worse than Hitler. I mean, that's the say. He's worse than Trump. And Trump was worse than Hitler. Oh, wow. And what was Mitt Romney again? I mean, it's always a choice between utopia. We can't really define it, but we'll know it when we get there. And we can't tell you how we're going to pay for it, but it's all going to be sugar plum fairies and lollipops. It's wonderful. Or go ahead. You can roast in the fires of hell with Satan and Armageddon. Go ahead. And they convince us that the power of a nation should not belong to you. Everything belongs to you. Everything in your life, all of your thoughts, your actions, they belong to you. The things you have earned through merit belong to you. And if you've, quote, earned something without merit, if you've just inherited it, you don't really own it. Something becomes yours when you've earned it, but all that goes out a window. The power of a nation doesn't belong to people. It's stuff. It should all belong to the state. So people, one by one, historically speaking, hand all of their power over to the state. And then the state decides what its people should be, what they can say, what they can watch, what they can listen to. They define hate. You and I both know hate. We know hate when we see hate. We know love when we see love. I can tell you the difference between love and sex. There's a big difference. Love always wins. Sex doesn't always win. Utopians take the state and turn it into the brain of society, and it controls everything. Now think of this. This is from the 1600s. Think of this. The state becomes the brain of society. With AI and all of the technology we have today, they are literally trying to be the brain of society and control everything and hold all of the power. It will do the thinking and deciding for everyone. In America, the first utopian was Woodrow Wilson, really. The one with real power. He used centralization and bureaucracy to make a collectivism that Americans had never seen before. And then he spread it in all the universities. He convinced Congress to hand them their power so he could use war and surveillance to make a world safe for democracy. FDR took the step even further. He said it would get rid of war altogether with a little help from Joseph Stalin. We've seen all of these things before, and America turned just in time. Will we this time? Because there's one more example that we should learn from, and it is from China. But remember, China is the new model, according to all the global leaders, all of the big capitalist leaders, and all the leaders of the world, including Joe Biden. China is the new model. Well, let me tell you how they got there in a minute. All right, I want to talk to you about the great cultural revolution here. Like every good utopian, Mao started with ideas. I got ideas. Slogans, basically, that sound good but don't really mean anything. See if any of these sound familiar to you. Before long, the slogans are truth. This is how he made every aspect of life political. That way, anyone who disagreed with him was conspiring against China, the great utopia. They weren't his opponents. They were the enemies of the people. This is why utopians always combine academia with the military. The academics dream up the new utopias, and the military forces people into those utopias. And Mao was really clever about this. He convinced people how they had a role in how things work. Your lives are political for a reason. This is how he got students to snitch on one another, then get kids to betray their own parents, all in the names of the state. This is how you create a whole society of vigilantes. For Woodrow Wilson, he had the 4-Minute Men. That was his goons. For Mao, the Red Guards, young activists who served as his unofficial enforcers. In colleges, I just told you who the snitchers were, and they think they're doing good, just like these others did. The tech world, isn't that really the enforcer of the government now? One of the first utopians of the modern age really was Mao. He was the most prolific at death. They take power to destroy history. That's the first thing. They say the world as we know it, China as we know it, has to be replanned, reset, because everything you know is old, dusty, and no longer any good. At the start of the Cultural Revolution, the Red Guard led a campaign to eradicate the four olds. I want you to listen. Pesky four olds. The four olds that they had to get rid of. The old customs. Christmas means nothing. Thanksgiving is a celebration of slavery. 4th of July is a celebration. Get rid of the old customs. The old culture. You needed new habits and new ideas. The old history had to be swept away. The old guard had to be swept away. They started, believe it or not, by tearing down statues and changing the names of streets. Then they attacked anyone who tried to stop them. They destroyed people's homes. They publicly humiliated their opponents, and no one could stop them because people had already given Mao all their power. Before long, the Red Guard was destroying cemeteries and factories and libraries and museums and temples. Wow, they were burning down their own cities. What happens is the same story over and over again. They want to reform the big institutions of society, but in the end, they only destroy the small institutions, family, church, private property. And they always start with the idea that you have a duty to the state, and the group is more important than the individual. And if that individual is speaking out, they have to be shut down. That was only the first installment of Mao's genocidal reign.